It's time for the annual Atlus survey. As per the norm, Atlus has sent out a link to fans for a survey they can fill out to get information on their audience. Which means it's time to talk. What potential revelations can we get from this survey this year? What did they ask about? What didn't they ask about? Is there anything potentially interesting on the horizon? Well...
You can find your buses that way.
Damn, you speak Japanese?
Of course, I'm not covering every question on here. This video would stretch on for way too long for things that are not worth it. Let's talk about one of the main things they covered, which is the standard survey stuff. A lot of this stuff is seeing what their demographic is. Questions like, which of these games do you know? Which of these games have you played? What genres do you like? What genres do you play? What devices do you own? How often do you use them? These are just general demographic questions that appear on almost every survey a company does. This way, Atlus knows what their fans play, what they like, and where they play. Useful for them, not really as much for us. General demographic questions sometimes dictate future releases and things like that, but we have no info to go on to assume that any of this means anything. Yes, they might be asking you, have you played Elden Ring? That does not mean a Shin Megami Tensei action Souls-like game is on the horizon. Though you know what, I would play that.
A brand new fantasy RPG from the creators of Persona 3, 4, and 5.
And this is the first title that they asked about specifically. And nothing really to report here. We know this title's coming out in a few months. It's not a hypothetical, this really does exist. And I'm gonna play it. Again, nothing surprising here, as this was already announced. The other title that they talked about was... Gacha games are all the rage nowadays. With Persona 5, the Phantom X's Chinese, Taiwan, and Korean releases soon to be reaching 2.0, the most intriguing thing from this survey as a Persona fan is probably the, would you play this game if it was brought to global? As I am already playing it, yeah, I would. Gacha itself is generally not seen in an incredibly positive light outside of Asian territories. The model itself tends to be pretty predatory, and many people do not wish to engage with it because of that. But I'm someone who does engage in them, and usually I don't wind up spending money, but sometimes I do. Interestingly enough, this is the only new spin-off title even mentioned. The survey didn't even ask their usual, which kinds of spin-offs would you be interested in? Now, does that mean Persona spin-offs might be dying down? I don't really know.
Oh yeah, we almost forgot.
It's empty?
And the conversation begins to shift right here. Atlus has been the topic of some questionable business decisions over the past few years. Namely, their obsession with enhanced editions and interestingly priced DLC. However, before we get into that, let's talk about their deluxe editions. These usually come pre-packaged with the day one DLC for the games, and sometimes wind up being a bit cheaper than buying all the DLC and the base game at once. And of course, Atlus, like the rest of the industry, loves their day one DLC, but their digital deluxe versions tend to come with stuff like additional artwork or the soundtrack, and they even did early access a few times. They did ask about this, and although I did buy Persona 5 Strikers Digital Deluxe, I would rather not give them fuel to convince them that shoving a few days early access into deluxe editions of games is something I want to see, because nothing is stopping them from just releasing that game that day normally. Having to pay that extra $10 for early access instead of Atlus just going, well, the game's gonna come out that day anyway, so it's ready to go, let's just release it. Because that could mean a lot of different things. They could charge a digital deluxe that's not just $10 more, but $30 more. Now you're paying $100 for a game just for those 3 days early access and a bunch of DLC that you may or may not want. But they asked what reasons I normally purchase deluxe editions, and for me, it's generally because the price of everything in it is way cheaper than buying it all separately, and sometimes it includes some extra goodies you wouldn't get normally.
Dude, I have to say, I was really hoping for your help on this.
The rumor that Atlus wants to focus more on DLC and less on enhanced editions has come and gone. And it's not really that convincing, since after that rumor came around, SMT5 Vengeance was announced. That said, change is incremental, not instantaneous. It's very likely this decision was made during the development or post-development of Persona 3 Reload. I don't think it's a decision that was made that recently by Atlus. so things like SMT5 Vengeance were likely already deep into development, and canceling the project just wouldn't be worth it at that point. Atlus's direction could be changing to focus more on post-launch story DLC rather than enhanced editions, which I do hope is the case. Either way, the survey asked about both, and why you would buy an enhanced edition or DLC. It seems that Atlus is fishing for opinions to find the right direction to move in. Now, whether or not anything changes in the future is probably something we won't know for at least 5 to 10 years. But if we do see Persona 3 Reload FemC Edition in a few years, then we know what they chose. And of course, there is the topic that they asked about how much you expect from a game of a certain price. I think that's an interesting conversation to have when you consider the fact that they've released several DLC packs that I personally do not see as worth the price. One of these being Persona 5 Tactica's story DLC that comes at a whopping $20, and another being Soul Hackers 2 additional DLC story that is about, I think, $10 to $20, and it just didn't seem that worth it to me.
Here's the guys that are bringing you this show.
And one of their final questions was, what makes an Atlus game an Atlus game? Now, for me personally, it's the UI design, it's the characters, and it's the stories they tell. Of course, there are other things like their very identifiable combat system that's featured in several of their big titles. But to me, the thing that Atlus has made stand out about them is genuinely their UI design. It's one of the reasons that other studios and developers are looking more into UI design and how to make it stylish and smooth. I can't say all that influence comes from Persona, of course, but it's there. But really, at the end of the day, while this survey really didn't give us that much compared to their usual surveys, I will say that I hope that all of these opinions coming from their fans will lead us into a better direction for the future for Atlus. And I hope they continue to produce quality games while taking these opinions into account. And did you take the survey? Let me know down in the comments below. As always, you can leave a like if you enjoyed the video, and subscribe to the channel for more things Persona, Atlus, and anime RPG related. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.
Oh my god!
How you feeling?